Does your practice feel like you're building a sandcastle while the tide is coming in? As in, you're struggling to internalize new concepts because you have no way of ingraining them into your playing. Now you're sick of memorizing modes because you have no way to apply them in context. And music is just starting to get boring because you're not experiencing any evolution and you don't see a way to expand creatively. This video is for you. I'm Blake Hawley. I've got a master's degree in jazz performance and 2 decades of experience playing jazz, rock, and metal for audiences all over North America. Now, my mission is to guide musicians such as yourself to reaching your highest creative potential. And I'm going to show you how I do that in this video. But before that, I'm going to show you some of the work I've been doing with musicians who have already joined my program.
Wow, yeah, it's just crazy. I never really thought of stuff this way. Like, you really read about you really crack some kind of code or something, and you word it in a way that's very understandable. I'm really surprised that I'm able to grasp it, because I was always told, people oh yeah, learn the scales, and I was oh fuck, Dorian, Phrygian, I don't fucking know, I don't know, I just get confused. I definitely like this approach way better.
You see how you apply chord construction to this and you're cooking with white gas. Literally, that's the takeaway that I want you to really leave with in practice now. In the context of fat shapes, minor chords, the 4th and the 5th are straight up interchangeable. So that's exactly what this is. So now let's just hear it without variation. I can hear your drummer just
Exactly.
Yeah, man, that's killing.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know if I've ever really talked about triadic voice leading.
Unlocking the awareness of what I call the creation framework, right? That's the creation framework right there. That's it. That's the whole thing. Just outlining form with knowing all the notes of all the chords, how to compose melodies over that, using the same exact knowledge that you would to create the chords. It's the same exact knowledge you do to create the melody. And then from there, we can get more complex with what we call the rhythmic frameworks.
Excited. I can really see this coming together. So again, I appreciate the lesson. This is great.
You're going to hear how rich that is right here.
Yeah, you're killing me. It's so great.
This was well beyond what I would have thought that I was capable of producing.
So right now, I suspect you're doing one of 2 things for practice. You're either practicing the same lick over and over again, hoping that's somehow going to get in your playing, or you're memorizing scale patterns, modes, chord shapes, and also hoping those are somehow going to get into your playing. The problem with both of these approaches is they are lacking any kind of context, as in you aren't applying the concepts to a form or harmonic sequence. You're focused on the micro when the trick is to focus on the macro. Micro is licks, scale patterns, all this little stuff. Macro is form. It's the big picture. Focusing on macro is the trick to expanding your vocabulary and, as a byproduct, expanding your technique. So what exactly is form? Well, in many ways, form is the most important concept that a musician needs to understand to execute at the highest level, whether that's improvisation or composition. It's the same principles. Now, here's a really simple yet iconic example of form. Just the 2 of us. Notice how it's short. See, we want to start with short and simple forms, and eventually we'll move to longer and more complex forms. And we can break this form down even further by just looking at the first 3 chord changes and unpacking all of their implications. The only thing that's changing when we look at more complex forms is really just the length and the harmonic rhythm. But in terms of the chord qualities, if you really get down to it, pretty much breaks down to 3 fundamental chord qualities: major 7, minor 7, and dominant 7. Because those 3 chord qualities are going to cover you for 93.6% of all harmonic sequences that you're going to deal with, even when it comes to some of the most complex forms you can possibly think of. Falling Grace would be a good example of a highly complex form that breaks down into those 3 chord qualities, or literally any tune at any level of complexity in any genre, because we're talking about first principles of music making right now. It always comes down to the ability to express the underlying harmony of the form in what you play. This is the art of playing chord changes. The key is to focus on expressing the form instead of focusing on individual licks, right? Focusing on the macro instead of focusing on the micro. The licks you play will be determined by the form. For that reason, there really is no purpose in creating licks outside of the context of form. And we can lean into this idea even further by just letting the harmony dictate all of our melodic decisions. So how do we practice in the context of form? This is where we leverage the technology. Welcome to the MIDI practice system. Oh man, dude, exactly. So what we're doing is we're creating a motif for a 2-bar loop. I was just talking about this to good old Professor Heaton. We're talking about motif playing. Look how much Meshuggah influence is on this, right? The displacement and also the sort of motif shape sort of playing. This is like that Frederick Fortendahl thing, man. This is like literally how he's thinking. He's taking like either fretboard shapes or melodic shapes, you know, intervallic geometric shapes, however you want to call it. And he's just doing variations with them, right? And he's doing the variations rhythmically and also harmonically as well. But right here, these 3 chord changes contain the entire universe, right? So if we can play over these 3 chord changes, we can play over literally anything. Literally, you'll see what I mean, especially if we're really focusing on this triadic approach. Like literally on purpose, the simplest, most straightforward possible, you know, like obviously that's going to turn into literally like Holdsworthian levels. Displacement, right? You can think about displacement as like one of the basic fundamental ways to add variation, right? Like, so you can literally take, for example, like this, you take this exact same thing, right? And what you're going to do is repeat it, but down a half step. Now let's just hear that, right? Kind of like a rhythm that maybe you haven't played in a long time or even heard in a long time, actually, right there. You know what I mean? Like, listen to it one more time there. Right? And you see where I'm going. This is the MIDI practice system. You're trying to get comfortable playing on all the different subdivisions here, right? That's what's going on. So you're playing it first on the downbeat, right? And then you're playing on last 16th note. What does practicing rhythm look like? You know, we've had this whole rhythmic invincibility conversation. It's just about displacement. That's what confident rhythm is, being like, oh, I'm going to paste this one onto the last 16th note. This is how you get good at that. This is how you see where those are, right? Last 16th note, you know, this is third 16th note, so you know what's happening next. But, okay, we got to deal with this, right, though? You can't go down a half, it's not B, right? B natural is not fitting. This is F minor, right? This is F, so what the heck, right? So C, keep C. You see what's going on here? We're about to reveal a new triadic shape, right? Right, that one. You know what I mean? It's this one that I just showed you, but 2 notes are different, right? G goes to A flat, E goes to F. Now we've revealed a new triad shape here that we can play rhythmically, right? And what's great is this whole anticipation thing that's happening here, it's just keeps working for us, right? Because that C fits over C, and of course it fits over F. So these displacements are just like, you know, they're fitting exactly perfectly into the form in a way that we might have not come to this conclusion on pure creativity alone. You know what I mean? Like, this is where the systems come in, and realize when we practice this this is where all the variations. We're just coming up with that basic framework reference point here, right? Classic mentality stuff, right? This is stuff you just got to talk about and look at in real time and experiment with and do the stuff that we're talking about right now to get those, understandings, right? And like see this kind of stuff, understand the framework of creation itself, right? Literally, that's what this is. That's why the MIDI practice system, I feel like this thing goes back to ancient times. Anytime I'm working in MIDI, I'm like, man, don't you think like the people who built the pyramids were doing this kind of stuff on some analog, non-electronic instrument, or maybe electronic? I mean, don't underestimate electricity. Who knows how it's been used in the past. But I do think this like MIDI approach with this like geometry, this is so cool. It's so like old school basic, right? So all we're dealing with is just like basic first principle rhythms, basic harmony, and letting that speak. This approach, like I'm saying that it's very simple, but at the same time, this is like basically what all the best guys are doing. In my opinion, the best guys, like Coltrane, for example, just huge triad level, right? And you see why it's so convenient, right? Even in just the two of us, it's still 2 chords per bar. What happens when you have a longer sustained chord? Lots and lots and lots of approaches here. But for the MIDI practice approach, we're just going to do something really like obvious in terms of like, let's just do a different inversion on F minor to practice our inversion grips, right? These two are open root position triads, right? And this one is an open second inversion triad because it's F minor over C. And you see that new shape emerge. It's classic now, instantly classic, because you see how the root position open major triad connects to the second inversion minor triad. You know what I mean? Open minor triad. So what's next? What's the obvious follow? Well, rhythmically we know and harmonically we know. See how this stuff is, it really writes itself in a way, because what I mean is like, obviously we know that the rhythm is going to happen right there. You know what I mean? Like, but what's going to be the, are we going to do that same chord? Obviously, no. Even though the rhythm is changing everything, like the rhythm is giving us all kinds to work with, but like, we're just going to move it up the partial. This term, the partial. I talk about that term, that's what it is. It's right. Second inversion is going to take us to, root position, but root position is going to be the old 1-5-3, right? So look how that just turned out. So let's hear that, right? That rhythm is like, it's systematic. The practice level on this is absolutely golden, right? So after we establish this, I'm gonna like, okay, let's go play some guitar. You're just starting to see, oh, well, I can just, play the second instead of the third. I can just play the major 6th instead of the 5th on a major chord. I can play the major 6th instead of the major 7th on a major chord, blah, 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 blah. You see how much you can do with a little bit of information. You know what I mean? That's really what it is. This is the practice system that will literally turbo boost your playing to the highest level. The MIDI allows you to engrave your ideas and hear them played back flawlessly at any tempo you choose. This is exactly how you avoid the tide coming in and wiping out your sandcastle. Now you no longer need to play the same lick over and over again to hear it properly. Instead, you're going to engrave it in the MIDI and instantly hear the perfect iteration at whatever tempo you want. In this way, you can literally program yourself to play anything. The MIDI practice system is where you load ideas into your pipeline of vocabulary. And of course, these ideas should be practiced on your instrument once they are clearly established in the MIDI. In this way, we waste 0 time in our practice sessions. And not only that, we are able to generate vocabulary with the highest level of awareness. This is the opposite of being trapped in pentatonic box fretboard shapes, right? Escape the fretboard, realize a larger paradigm of melodic creation.